So we're going to be looking at different ways of monitoring your training over the next few videos, but this particular video is about heart rate training. So there are a number of different ways that you can monitor your training. This is just one of them. They all have their good and bad points, and I'm going to discuss those with you now so that you're more informed about what you might want to use to help you with working out how you're doing with your training. So with heart rate training, some people swear by it and will just attach their hands to the coat hooks and go, yep, this is the thing for me, this is what I'm going to do. And that's fine if that's what they want to do, but it's really important that you understand the limitations of each of these different methods of training. So some people do dismiss it completely and call it pseudoscience, and would prefer to use something else. What's really clear and what's really important that you understand is that your heart rate isn't a simple one-off accurate measure of just your running effort. As you probably appreciate, you are far more complex than that, and far more sophisticated as a creature. So unfortunately, there isn't just one number that we can just use. Generally, when we're talking about heart rate, there are two things we're looking at. So one is stroke volume. So that's how much blood is pumped with each heartbeat. And the second is the frequency of the heart beating. So how often, and that's measured in beats per minute. So the fitter somebody is, the more powerful their stroke volume. So their heart doesn't need to beat as often to get the blood around the body because they're pumping out a lot of blood with each heartbeat. And that's what makes them more efficient. So their heart rate is lower because they don't have to have it pump as often. As you become more conditioned and fitter, your resting heart rate, you'll notice, will drop, and also your heart rate at rest or at any level will be lower. So that's good because your heart has to do less work and it's more efficient. However, it also means, on the flip side of that, that you have to work harder and increase your workload to push your heart rate up into a higher heart rate zone. Why it can be helpful. How is it helpful to know this? Well, in your first few months of training, it can be really, really useful to understand and help you to learn how your body adapts and copes with different efforts, how you respond, and then help you also to understand pacing and how those pacing demands impact on your body. I would try not to just rely on it forever though. So in the first few months, it's really helpful because you're learning a lot as you're starting to get into running. But there's lots of different factors that also impact on your heart rate. So for example, if you've recently eaten and your body is digesting food, then your heart rate will be elevated right from the beginning. So if you're trying to stick to a particular heart rate zone or level, you might find it a bit harder if you've recently eaten food because of your body digesting food. Also, if you're a little bit under the weather, and you might feel absolutely fine, but your body is telling you through your elevated heart rate that actually you're not 100%. And it can often be a really good early warning sign that you need to start to do something and address something. Otherwise, you are going to get a cold or get a little bit poorly. So this has been really useful for me. When I've seen that I've had an elevated heart rate, resting heart rate, I've thought, right, okay, I'm going to do something about this. I'm just going to start being a bit more intentional about drinking water regularly every day, because usually I'm not brilliant at doing that. And quite often that has just been enough to help me bring my resting heart rate back to normal again. And I haven't got ill, which has been brilliant. So it won't always work, and also just be more intentional about the quality of food that you're putting into your body as well. So being a bit under the weather can affect your heart rate. If you're particularly stressed or have a lot of pressure or lots of things are going on in your life that's creating this kind of anxiety or stress, that can impact on your heart rate as well. Any caffeine that you have or other stimulants, that can artificially raise your heart rate level as well. Also, your heart rate can fluctuate from day to day. So if you were doing a workout on a Monday, your heart rate data could be completely different to what it would be if you did exactly the same thing the following day. So I like to use heart rate data over to see long-term trends rather than to focus on individual workouts. Also, just to say, if you're dehydrated, that can have an impact on your heart rate too. So that can slowly, gradually increase your heart rate over the run that you're doing. And yes, your heart rate will potentially go up gradually anyway because of fatigue during a run. But if you're also dehydrated, that's going to impact as well, which isn't great, because your heart is then going to have to work a lot harder when you're not necessarily sustaining a particularly difficult pace. So again, it'll mean that you're going to have longer to recover from that as well. Also, music. There have been studies that show that music can increase your heart rate and impact on it, because your body then, your heart starts to beat to the music, which sounds quite amazing that can happen, but there you go, it can. And I would just say that if you are going to listen to music on the run, please make sure that you're safe and can still hear what's going on around you, and it doesn't hinder you in any way. I wish I could listen to music on the run. I would love to be able to do that, but I find that it just messes up my rhythm or my ability to pace myself, because I just get so lost in the music that it just messes my speeds up. And also, I really don't like feeling so isolated and cut off from my surroundings. I much prefer to be knowing and appreciating and understanding what is happening around me when I go for a run too. But that particular bit is completely personal preference. Finally, if you find that your heart rate is elevated more than you're expecting it to be, it could be a sign of chronic fatigue and overtraining. So you might be doing too much, not necessarily just your running, but everything else that you've got going on in your life as well. So it's really useful to use your heart rate monitoring to help you see or spot any patterns in that, because it might just be a sign that you need to just ease back either in your running or other training, or take a bit of time for yourself if life is just getting a little bit on top of you. So bear that in mind too. There is also a gender difference in terms of heart rate. So women tend to have smaller cardiovascular systems than men do, and therefore a lower stroke volume. So their heart doesn't pump out as much blood each time as a man's would, and therefore they rely on their heart beating faster so they can get blood around their body. So that's just something to bear in mind as well. And also, I would just say at this point as well, while we're talking about men and women's differences, is just to also say there's no point you comparing your heart rate with anybody else, because you'll be a different height, different weight, different diet history, different everything really. So the only thing that you can really track is your own one in relation to your own heart rate. And then finally, the other two factors on your heart rate that can have an impact are altitude. So the higher the altitude you're working at, the harder your heart has to work because of the less oxygen in the air. And also, when the temperature is hotter, your heart has to work harder because it's already working hard trying to keep you cool, but then you're exercising on top of it, which makes it harder because it needs to get blood through to all the muscles. So that is why running in the heat, relative heat, feels so much harder, because it really is. It's working your body in a really, really tough way. So they are all the factors, a lot of the factors anyway. There probably are more, but that's a huge number of different factors that can impact on your heart rate, and which is why heart rate training shouldn't just be used in isolation, but could be used as one means of monitoring how you're progressing with your training. So finally, I just wanted to say, if you are concerned at all at any stage about anything to do with your heart rate or your heart generally, please make sure you go and speak to a GP about it. Make sure someone knows, ask someone, a medical professional, who can give you the most accurate, up-to-date information. Okay, see you on the next video.